My name is Hannah Treppenhauer, and today I will be proposing an extension of Michelle Obama's Let's Move initiative, the Know Your Food campaign. Launched in 2010, Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign was described as a comprehensive initiative dedicated to solving the challenge of childhood obesity within a generation. With the goal of reducing rates of childhood obesity down to just 5% by 2030, Let's Move initiative would go on to transform the environment of school food across America, implementing new nutrition guidelines for the first time in more than a decade, and providing for tens of millions of children to receive healthier meals and snacks while at school. However, Let's Move has drawn criticism in the many years since launch for its seeming lack of meaningful impact in meeting campaign objectives. Specifically, since the initiative was launched in 2010, rates of childhood obesity have risen in figures that drift increasingly farther from the original goal of the campaign. In addition to this, emerging communications research on their campaign strategy suggests that there may have in fact been no coordinated communication strategy for the campaign at all, meaning that aside from metrics that assessed how many people viewed the campaign PSAs, there was no effort to measure either reception of the ads or the amount of behavior and attitude change as a result of them. In addition to the ads, student reception of new foods introduced in the Let's Move campaign remains questionable as well, although there is some amount of anecdotal evidence to be found online and throughout social media that suggests it may have been negative. Now, you might be saying to yourself, well, okay, kids are usually picky eaters. This might not necessarily speak to shortcomings of the Let's Move initiative, but I would argue that it does. When Michelle Obama framed her campaign around increasing the health of school-age children, she failed to take into account one crucial aspect shared by the group she was targeting with Let's Move. Health, as a value, is not perceived as personally relevant to most children when it comes to consuming food. This is not to say that they don't understand the perceived benefits and risks of consuming healthier food, because they do, but they hold a cognitive dissonance between this knowledge and the healthy foods being presented to them. Anyone who has tried to get a kid to eat vegetables knows that far more strategy is required past telling them that it's healthier than their favorite junk food. And I would hope it doesn't surprise you that describing the potential for these junk foods to clog their arteries and kill them when they're older is not particularly effective with kids either. From a theoretical standpoint, it might then be proposed that, in addition to a lack of coordinated outreach, one of the most detrimental limitations of Michelle Obama's anti-obesity initiative was the campaign's misuse of fear appeals as a persuasive tactic. In Chapter 12, Perloff discusses how strategically inducing fear can be leveraged as a powerful tool in promoting constructive changes to both attitude and behavior. In short, fear motivates people to take action. However, in the same chapter, Perloff also notes that the use of fear appeals as a persuasion tactic may be more complicated than previously thought, digressing that fear appeals are ineffective in changing attitudes when they do not connect to the person's belief about the problem or when they fail to provide appropriate solutions to reduce fear. In the case of the Let's Move initiative, fear appeals like the consequences of obesity were ineffective because they largely placed the responsibility of behavioral change on individual children and families, in contrast to recognizing other important structural or industry causes of obesity. Furthermore, a recent study found that anti-obesity fear appeals were particularly ineffective with children because children do not perceive themselves to be obese and therefore at risk, implying the campaign was also limited in assuming their audience would find the issue personally relevant. In consideration of the limitations in the Let's Move initiative, I'm proposing a new campaign that extends these ideas into a modern context and improves upon them by reestablishing the significance of food beyond individual health and towards community vitality, cultural survival, and environmental integrity. A new campaign that emphasizes the holistically crucial importance of knowing your food. In my proposed Know Your Food campaign, the aim is to persuade school-age children to reject the idea of food as a commodity, which carries the additional potential of balancing dissonance cognitively held between school foods introduced through the Let's Move initiative and the prevailing eating habits of students. Similarly to the Let's Move campaign, one of the measurable strategic objectives of Know Your Food would also be a decrease in obesity rates over time. However, unlike the Let's Move campaign, Know Your Food would not be explicitly framed around this objective. Instead, the proposed campaign would address rising obesity rates as a systemic consequence of our industrialized food system, holistically treating it as one of many symptoms rather than an isolated incident of failed individual responsibility. In extending the momentum of Let's Move and recognizing that schools are a unique medium through which issues of crucial social change can influence the youngest members of society, the primary audience being targeted in the Know Your Food campaign will also be school-age children. However, in regard to recent research that suggests children become more susceptible to social influence starting at age 12, I propose limiting the primary audience in this campaign to just middle school and high school, or more specifically, 12 to 17-year-olds. Some of the most crucial insight into this target group comes from a study that found that 97% of teens aged 13 to 17 use the internet every day, with further results implying that YouTube and TikTok would be key platforms in reaching this demographic. Considering that the Let's Move campaign largely used PSAs to reach their target audience, I believe these figures demonstrate the huge potential of Know Your Food to effectively extend this initiative into a modern context by strategically targeting teens on platforms that they actually engage with. Okay, so that's where we'll reach them, but how will we reach them? Better yet, how can we persuade them to eat more sustainably for the holistic health of not only themselves, but their communities, cultures, and environment? The health belief model suggests that individuals are more likely to take action if they perceive a threat to their health and believe that the recommended action can reduce the threat. The Let's Move campaign employed this model by asserting that obesity and likelihood of associated diseases could be reduced with more exercise and healthier diets. As previously discussed, however, we know that this strategy was somewhat ineffective in Let's Move because the school children did not perceive the presented threat as something that they were at risk for. Within the Know Your Food campaign, using the health belief model to craft persuasive messages holds the potential to be similarly ineffective with our primary audience. Not because teenagers do not perceive themselves to be fat, believe me, they do, but because teenagers have what Perloff describes as an illusion of invulnerability. As social judgment theory suggests that individuals have pre-existing attitudes and judgments that influence their reception of messages, this may be a major barrier in using fear appeals to motivate action in our primary audience for the Know Your Food campaign. However, the same theory suggests potential in aligning the messages of our campaign with this audience's actually existing values, like environmental consciousness, social justice, and cultural appreciation, using emotional appeals rather than fear. One of the other previously discussed limitations of Michelle Obama's campaign was assuming their primary audience was under a high level of involvement. In attempting to mitigate this with the Know Your Food campaign, what if we were to instead assume that most of our primary audience had a low level of involvement? Under the elaboration likelihood model, which theorizes that individuals process messages through one of two routes, this assumption would mean that our primary audience might process messages in the Know Your Food campaign through the peripheral route more effectively than they would go through central. This would also suggest that our primary audience might respond better to simple cues, such as a credible communicator that can help them quickly process the messages in Know Your Food. Further supporting this notion would be entertainment education theory, which posits that entertainment media can be a powerful tool for conveying educational messages, especially with younger audiences that respond better to peripheral cues. Taking this into account, it may not be a question of how we reach them after all, but rather who will reach them. Introducing Food Journey with Bill Nye. Appealing to the platform preferences of our target group, Know Your Food would be a multi-channel campaign with Bill Nye at the forefront of it. On YouTube, Food Journey would be launched through a series of episodes covering topics like food science, the farm-to-table journey, the significant roles that food plays in culture, and global perspectives on food sustainability. Through entertaining demonstrations and hands-on activities, this program could appeal to our audience of 12 to 17-year-olds in a way that Let's Move did not, by recognizing their prevailing attitudes towards these topics. On TikTok, snippets of these episodes could be posted in 15, 30, and 60-second increments, acting as cues to those who process peripherally. And on Snapchat, story updates from Bill Nye could provide a behind-the-scenes look into his educational process, which could in turn make for a deeper connection with our audience and a more personal narrative for the campaign. Bill Nye's charisma, credibility, and expertise as an educator could help to make these interdisciplinary concepts relatable and exciting, acting as a peripheral cue while simultaneously carrying the ability to appeal to those who process centrally by providing evidence-based and logical arguments. While Perloff might argue that using Bill Nye as a spokesperson for this campaign could potentially carry the risk of perceived knowledge bias within our primary audience, I might in turn argue that his association is significant in its potential to appeal to both our primary and secondary audience, parents and caregivers. Research suggests that you would be hard-pressed to find a Gen X or millennial who hasn't heard of Bill Nye, meaning that our proposed spokesperson for Know Your Food is already well known by our secondary audience. Similar to our primary audience, the peripheral cue that his association with the campaign provides alone could be enough to persuade those in our secondary audience to engage with food holistically and support the kids in their care to do the same. Now, unlike the primary audience, adults in this demographic have been found to respond to fear appeals like those used in Let's Move, which suggests that the health belief model may be applied to our secondary group. It might also be assumed that this target is under a high level of involvement, as the majority of parents worry both about the health of their kids and the kind of world that would be left to them. Under the elaboration likelihood model, it might then be suggested that our secondary audience is more likely to process messages centrally, as they're more likely to be motivated to seriously consider the messages in Know Your Food. However, both the health belief and elaboration likelihood model stipulate that a key factor in motivating our secondary audience towards these desired actions is providing them with the belief that they are capable of doing so. They must perceive ability. Finally, research suggests that the spread of preference towards different platforms between Gen X and millennials are actually not so dissimilar, with both of these generations being most active on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram respectively. With this in mind, the biggest focus to then take with our secondary audience is in making them feel capable of supporting their child's holistic relationship with food. On Facebook, Know Your Food would be launched as an interactive community page that hosts regular live sessions where scientists, nutritionists, and other parents alike could address community questions about personal implications of the campaign and provide practical tips for supporting the primary audience, such as recipes for fresh and easy meals that could be prepared as a family, growing food at home, reducing food waste, and immersing themselves more deeply into their cultural food. Similar content would be disseminated on the site with links to additional resources and information to further support them. On Instagram, partnerships with organizations like Cooking Matters can help to not only visually showcase sustainable food choices and its holistic effects, but provide necessary support to secondary audience members who are constrained by time and money. While infographics featuring fear appeals similar to those in the Let's Move campaign will be used, I believe a crucial requirement of this messaging will be an emphasis on the idea that neither healthy food nor healthy bodies have one look. In shifting the conversation away from BMIs and dieting, I believe this could potentially overcome some of the anti-obesity stigma within the Let's Move campaign, while simultaneously promoting the secondary audience's ability to engage with the Know Your Food campaign. It can be as easy as preparing a family meal together or talking about the memories you associate with your favorite food. The connections we have with food go far beyond our health. Food connects us. While the proposed approach majorly draws from the elaboration likelihood and health belief model, the execution was also informed by diffusion theory, which states that while the use of mass media is most influential in increasing knowledge of the campaign, interpersonal communication is more effective in changing attitudes, which is the primary objective of the Know Your Food campaign. By encouraging our second audience of parents and caregivers to engage with the campaign through these social networks, we can create a sense of community and foster a culture of support and encouragement that transforms Know Your Food from an informational campaign into a movement, allowing it to generate organic word of mouth and broaden the reach of its message. The expected outcomes of the Know Your Food campaign are multifaceted and ambitious. By emphasizing the holistic value of food beyond individual health and promoting its connection to culture, community, and the environment, the campaign aims to reduce obesity rates among the primary audience over time. Although, unlike the Let's Move initiative, which focused solely on individual health and utilized fear appeals, Know Your Food seeks to engage its primary audience through emotionally resonant messaging aligned with their actual values, taking advantage of modern platforms like YouTube and TikTok, where 12 to 17-year-olds are highly active to deliver engaging interdisciplinary content. By targeting parents and caregivers through platforms like Facebook and Instagram, Know Your Food can also foster a sense of community and support, amplifying the campaign's impact through interpersonal communication. The Know Your Food campaign employs a comprehensive theoretical approach in addressing the limitations of Michelle Obama's Let's Move initiative, significantly increasing the likelihood that this proposed extension may be able to succeed in crucial areas where its predecessor did not. And finally, these are the references that informed my approach.